Good morning or good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us here. We thought that we'd start a minute early, just since we do have a great group online already, and ask, where is everyone tuning in from? Let us know in the chat panel on the bottom right there. We'd love to see. You know, on our presenter panel this morning, we have Grace joining us from London, and I think the rest of us are based in Canada. Trent, I know you're not based in Vancouver, though.
No, Toronto.
Toronto. Some great representation today. So keep letting us know in the chat panel where you're joining from. We'd love to see it. It does look like we have the majority of folks here online now, so we can probably go ahead and get started. If Javita, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. Welcome, everybody, to a guide to integrating with the ArcGIS Enterprise. My name is Javita Chan. I'm a technical support specialist on the desktop side. I've been around with SAFE for about 4 years now, and you'll typically see me in the CAD to GIS realm. And going down the line, Trent wants to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Trent. I'm on the support team as well on the desktop side. I've been with SAFE for about 5 years, and I kind of do everything Esri.
Hi, my name is Grace. I'm dialing in from London. I work with Shell. I've been with Shell for about 10 years now, and I learned about FME on my first day on the job, and I've been using it ever since.
All right, and before we dive into things, if this is your first webinar in Livestorm with us, there's a few different ways that you can engage. We have that react button on the bottom middle, so send your reactions our way. We like to see how you're feeling throughout the webinar. We also have that questions tab on the bottom right. That's where you can drop your questions and upvote any questions that are relevant to you. And then we have the chat panel on the bottom right, which you're all diving into already, letting us know where you're tuning in from. So that's great. We'll also bring up a poll, so you'll see the polls tab on the bottom right. And then last but not least, we do have an help button on the bottom left. In case you have any audio issues, we have 4 simple steps there for troubleshooting.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Oops, excuse me. So for today's agenda, what we've got for you is a little bit of an introduction, who we are at SAFE, what does SAFE do? Then we've got our featured guest speaker, Grace Tai from Shell. Then I'll be doing a short demo on CAD to GIS just to show what it looks like for anyone who might be new to FME. And then Trent will be following up with a more advanced demo on working from ArcGIS Online to file Geodatabase and PowerPoint.
All right, so we do have a poll here to kick things off. And I'll go ahead and publish that under the polls tab. So let us know, which Esri formats or systems do you use? And we have 5 different options there. You can select more than one option if you use more than one. And then once you're ready, you can submit your vote there. And after you vote, folks, you can actually see the results come in live as well. Looks like most people have voted actually now, so we should be good to move on. But yeah, thanks everyone for voting.
So what we're here for today is to achieve no code, no fuss ArcGIS Enterprise data integration using FME. A little bit about our company. We've been around for about over 28 years, solving data challenges across 16,000 plus organizations, over 128 countries with FME customers. And we ourselves are a software vendor, but we do have partners that deliver services, and we've got 190 plus global partners to do that. In addition, we've got our FME community with boasting about 16,000 plus active users, and that's the forums that we'll point out to in the end as well. When we mention FME, we're talking about the entire FME Enterprise integration platform. Starting in the bottom left, FME Desktop is what you would need to author your workflows regardless of what other product you choose. And that's where you connect your data, translate it, and then write it out to where it needs to go. FME Server allows you to really scale up your usage to publish your workspace from desktop and allow more individuals in your organization to access it without even having to know how to author workflows. FME Cloud is essentially FME Server in the cloud. And then finally, FME Mobile allows you to access FME through your phone.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Thank you, Javita. I guess it's my turn. Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to be doing this talk for SAFE today. Integrating using FME with the ArcGIS Enterprise is something that I spend way too much time thinking about outside of work. So I'm really happy to be able to present this with an audience that are, I feel like, my kindred spirits. But before I jump into my first slide, I do have a disclaimer of sorts. So what this wall of text is basically saying is that please do not make any financial decisions based on anything I say today. I don't think we're in any danger of that. So in view of time, I'm going to move on to my first real slide. So to set the scene a little bit, here is Shell by the numbers back in 2020. As you can see, we're a pretty large organization. We employ over 80,000 people. And within this pool of people, we have lots of great ideas and a high diversity in expertise. So as a geomatician within Shell, on a normal day, I could be working with my colleagues in geology, or perhaps regulatory department, or environment, or maybe they're civil engineers. So as you can imagine, with the wide range of expertise also comes a wide range of data formats and a high volume of data as well. So yeah, you can probably guess why FME is one of my favorite tools. So like I said, I am part of the geomatics team here in Shell, and within geomatics, we have a further breakdown of expertise. So, for example, geodesy, positioning, survey operations, remote sensing, and geoinformation management, of course. And that is where FME shines the most in geoinformation management. But that is not to discount the other fields of expertise. Like you've seen in the previous slide, we do operate in over 70 countries. So that means we have well over 70 coordinate reference systems to contend with. And geodetic integrity is always at the forefront of our thoughts when we use FME and general problem solving in the GIS environment. So I should say that at this point, probably, we do use FME desktop and also server integrated with ArcGIS stack. So we have ArcGIS Enterprise databases and desktop, and also ArcGIS Online. So if I were to spread out all of the workspaces that we have in Shell onto the table, I would probably categorize them into these three buckets. The first is probably the most intuitive one. These are the data pipelines, the scheduled jobs that run on a regular basis. They are the backbones of our corporate data infrastructure, right? So they take non-spatial data from internal databases or external sources and spatializes them on a regular schedule, or vendor data to just move it and blend various data sources together to create useful data sets. They make sure that we always have a current view of the data landscape that we need. Yeah. And the second bucket is probably something that people often forget to talk about. I call them the quick solutions. They're the one-off workbenches that you create once and probably never think about again or look at again. But on the other hand, probably you do, right? You do, problems are never solved for good. They tend to come back in various forms. I've learned a lot from past grays by just digging through old workspaces such as these that's kind of spread out on the network drive. And the reason I want to give them a shout out is because workspaces are wonderful self-documenting tools. Without much effort of putting in extra annotations or bookmarks, I'm able to sort of play detective and rediscover some of the logic that I've built before. So there's tremendous value in that in an organization that is as dynamic and as large as Shell. And often when we do have new data and new ideas come into the picture, some of these quick solutions or some of these workspaces that started off as quick solutions do tend to grow, and maybe they blossom into a wonderful tool that we end up putting on FME server as a scheduled job, or perhaps as an application or webhook, which nicely segues me into the third category. I have to admit, I really wanted to put automations and maybe even streaming in this category, but if I'm honest, I haven't seen huge uptake in that just yet in Shell. So today I'm just going to stick with applications and webhooks. Now, these are really the game changers for us because it opened up a whole new customer base for the tools that we're building internally, right? So previously, if I had built a FME workspace, only someone with access to the desktop application will be able to run it. And often, getting the software installed or interacting with that interface is too daunting. But what applications allows us to do is to make very intuitive web apps from those workspaces. And now I can just send someone a URL and they paste it into their browser and off to the races they go. On the other hand, with webhooks, it turns workspaces into REST endpoints that allow other applications to call them and run these workspaces. And my favorite way actually of using webhooks is to embed them in my web map pop-ups. So on AGOL, if I'm making a map and there is a predefined logic that I know my teams would like to use from time to time, I will put the link to the workspace into the pop-up, maybe passing the object ID along when they run it, so their experience can be further customized. Now, I just want to share with you a couple of examples to sort of bring to 3D of how we use FME in Shell. And the first example I have here is from the pre-plague days, so circa 2018, 2019. This was when I first arrived in New Orleans, brand new teams, mostly made of production geologists and reservoir engineers and so on and so forth. Now, these folks had to create a lot of maps, reservoir maps for review every year. And usually they're very pressed for time when this exercise happens. And of course, all of the modeling work happens in other software that is not GIS. But we synthesize all of the findings into a map so the reviewer can review them. Naturally, people want to spend as much time as possible working on their models and working with the data. So we had very short amount of time to turn the modeling outputs into beautiful maps that our reviewers can look at. So what we ended up doing is sitting down with the teams, first coming up with a mapping standard, because you should never automate something that you haven't standardized. I learned that the hard way. And so we came up with a mapping standard, and then I created this massive data loader for the team to ingest their model outputs and produce the mapping elements that we ended up needing, and writing that out into a SDE that had a standard data model applied so that the data is always consistent. And once you have a very consistent database, it's very easy to then put a ArcPro template on top, with some dynamic texts and with some definition queries. It's fairly easy to create a large amount of maps with minimal manual intervention. So that was a huge win for us. The team, we had a lot of happy geologists at the end of the day that they no longer have to create their own maps. That is an example of what I call data funneling. I see examples of using FME for data funneling purposes all over the place in Shell, and I think it's a key component in organizations large as Shell that we have these tools so that we can build the consistent data sets that we need. So we can build on top of that and do further analytics. And the second example I have is something I call bridging the gap. So the way I see FME often is that it's this really malleable tool that that almost works like putty, that you can kind of connect different applications and different platforms. And often, you know, I'm sure people have heard of the last mile problem, right? A lot of solutions gets you 90% there, but you just need that extra bit of customization to make it all flow and all work. And my go-to solution is always FME for that. And this example that I had pretty recently, I think it's a good illustration. When my customer came to me and said, "Hey, Grace, I have this layer called blocks. It has blocks in it. And I have this other layer called opportunities. How do I like to just select a couple blocks and press a button and have it dissolved and show up in opportunities." So this is GIS 101, right? I mean, there's 100 ways of solving this problem, but that wasn't the challenge. The challenge is, how do we minimize the number of clicks that the customer has to do to make this happen? And can we do it without them having to leave the web map in their browser? Now, I could dust off my JavaScript skills and maybe build a custom widget, but in my line of work, whenever event handling comes into the conversation, there's a giant red flag that gets raised. And that's because I don't have time and have the desire to be supporting and maintaining that JavaScript code for the months or years to come. So naturally, I gravitated towards FME. What I ended up doing was giving my customer another layer called selector, which is just a points layer. And I said, "Hey, here's a bunch of colored points. Drop them over the blocks that you're interested in. You can color code them by the opportunity. And once you're satisfied, click this button." It was a webhook that kicked off a FME job that basically did an intersection of the points on the blocks, did a dissolve, and then spit the results back into opportunities. And there he had it, like the colored opportunities without having to leave the browser. And so my last point, I'm just going to loop back to the JavaScript comment that I made earlier. I think that FME is such a great tool for standardizing workflows within an organization like Shell, because it is so easy to use. First of all, the learning curve is a lot less steep than Python, for example, or JavaScript. And also it's very self-documenting, right? So I mentioned earlier about those kind of quick solutions. You know, you'd have to try really hard to make a workbench unreadable. So we always encourage folks to annotate and bookmark things and make sure everything is well documented. But, you know, we all get busy, and sometimes that doesn't always happen. I will always prefer an FME workbench to do detective work on versus a Python script. And that's just speaking for myself. Yeah, so FME has been a tremendous tool for us. And with our latest iteration of server, now that we have access to applications and streaming, I'm looking forward to many more years of working with FME. So thank you.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to pause. We will host a Q&A session at the end, so definitely be sure to keep dropping your questions in that questions panel as we go. And before we dive into some demos here, I'll actually ask if our presenters can turn off their webcams at this point, just so we can save on some bandwidth as we screen share here.
Thank you so much, Grace. That was an amazing presentation and a really tough presentation to follow. It's always great to hear what Shell is doing and what customers do with their workspaces in FME, as well as an FME server. Now, following up, I'll be looking at a workspace from CAD to GIS, and borrowing from Grace's presentation, I would consider this a platform gap bridger. So we will take a look at this now. The goal of this demo is to bring CAD data into GIS, including all of the text elements and all of the information. It does a drawing, so we want to be able to make it usable in GIS for analysis, further analysis down the road. The obstacles, of course, are the text elements that I mentioned. Sometimes they can be inside polygons, they can be adjacent to geometry, they can be everywhere. The solution, of course, is to use FME. The result, easy, breezy GIS, in the format you need it in, of course. So with that, we will head into a screen share. We're gonna start in the output. So we're writing from DWG out into ArcGIS Online, as well as File Geodatabase, but ArcGIS Online looks a little bit flashier, so we're here now. In ArcGIS Online, you can see lots. That's these parcels or polygons here. And we've got our roads as well. And thank you to the City of Surrey for this beautiful data. And this is kind of around our office area here in Surrey. So if I click around, I have a spinning circle, as well as the lot numbers. So we have gotten our text information. And then we also have our road names. So we'll take a look at the workspace that powers this now. Wrong direction. So this is the workspace. On our left here, just a refresher for anybody who might be a little bit newer to FME, we've got our readers, and that's our input or connection to the data. And I've got two different CAD files, and we're writing out using our writers on the right here, writing out simultaneously to File Geodatabase and ArcGIS Online. And those are our outputs. These blue transformers in the middle are our transformers, and that's what lets you manipulate your data. A quick look at our inputs just to compare with our outputs. And I've got the visual previewer here, so I can take a look at the data with my background maps on. And if we take a look at the data sources one at a time, we can see our polygons. And if I zoom in real close here, we can see our text nodes or points. And then we've got our road center lines, which also have text but adjacent instead of containment. So what this workspace really does is it processes that text data and brings it onto the geometry itself through containment and through neighbor finding, so what's closest to it, and then writes it out. So that's this workspace. Heading back into our slides. Some tips and tricks and things to keep in mind. So the data, you want to keep in mind the data you want to translate. So what do you need from the source data set? You also want to filter data early if you can, so that you're working with less and specifically what you need to work with. Lastly, you want to keep in mind the target format structure. For example, File Geodatabase and a lot of Esri formats require that each feature class only has one type of geometry. Formats such as shapefile, which have a 10-character limit for the attribute names. So it's good to keep kind of a target in mind to what you're translating to. With that, I'll pass it on to Trent now for a more advanced demo.
Thank you, Jovita. So now we're going to take a look at a little bit more advanced of a demo in terms of going from ArcGIS Online to a file geodatabase. A workflow that we see quite often in support is users wanting to replicate their data that is in ArcGIS Online or portal into a file geodatabase or their enterprise geodatabase. And this quite often actually revolves around attachments, that they need to be able to preserve those attachments that exist in their ArcGIS Online. So the goal of this demo is we're going to replicate an ArcGIS Online feature service and create a file geodatabase while maintaining the relationship between the features and their attachments. And in this case, the attachments will be images. So the obstacles, are going to be how can I download the attachments and keep the reference to that related feature? And the solution is FME. We can create a little workspace that is able to pull the attachments down, rebuild that relationship, and then create a file geodatabase for the user to continue to use. And then, if you wanted to go the extra step, you could throw this onto FME server and have this whole process automated. So it's going to back up your ArcGIS Online feature service with those attachments. You could do that nightly if you wished. Okay, here we go. So this is just my feature service in ArcGIS Online. So this is my data source data. This is coming from the city of Vancouver, and this is street art location, along with what is actually at that location in terms of an image. So here we'll see I do have some attachments. So if I just open this one, which actually I downloaded earlier just so we could see. So here's an image of the street art. And now we're going to jump into our little workspace. So what I'm doing in the workspace is we're just pulling down our data. I do a little bit of reprojecting just to get it into a coordinate system that I would prefer to work with. Then we kind of split off our data into, we have the features at the top, and then we have the images or the attachments at the bottom. We'll then rebuild the relationship just prior to writing out. And then we write out our features as well as the images or the attachments, if you will. And then if I just pop this open in ArcGIS Pro, so that same feature that we looked at briefly with in ArcGIS Online with that photo attachment, I've already done a little select by attribute just to get the specific features that I want to look at. So if I just pop this one open, I'll notice I have all the data here, and then more importantly, I've got the attachment down below. So that attachment was preserved inside of my file geodatabase. And then if I wanted to take this one step further and I wanted to, maybe I want to generate a report from this afterwards. In this case, I want to generate a street report for a given neighborhood. I want to know all the street art that is located within that. So here I've just created a little workspace that does that. And it basically would allow you to, or allow a user to select the neighborhood of Vancouver that they would like to see street art located in. It then does a little point on area overlayer and spit out a slide for each street art location along with an image of that. So if I look at that result here, so here I ran this earlier for Fairview, and then I see, the name of the street art or the location of it as well, and then what the street art actually looks like. Now this is just using, just a basic. I'm not using a template or anything like that, so you could do more advanced PowerPoint presentations if you had a template that you wanted to follow along with, or conform to, if you will. So just to summarize kind of what we covered there at a high level. So using FME, you have the ability to easily replicate ArcGIS Online to a geodatabase or to another format if you wish, while preserving the attachments. You can easily generate reports. They don't just have to be PowerPoints. They could be a Word document. It could be a PDF if you wished. And this is a very repeatable workflow that you could continue to use with other feature services or just other issues or problems that you're trying to solve within your organization. So, for next steps, please reach out to us if you have any questions about your data or any problems that you're actively trying to tackle within your organization. You can reach us at that info@safe.com. We're more than happy to hop on a call to try to get you, the best results for your data that you're working with. The workspaces showcased in this webinar will be available afterwards. And then, you can apply the workspaces to your own data once you have access to them. We have a number of licensing options that are available, to suit your individual organization's needs. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. We have another webinar with regard to using ArcGIS webhooks with FME, and then we have a community special one with regards to FME apps and ArcGIS maps as well. And then we have a blog as well that talks about 4 hub transformers that can be useful for ArcGIS Online integration.
Awesome, thanks Trent, and I'll take it from here just to wrap us up for Q&A. So just to briefly mention, if you do have any questions, get those in the question panel now. And as a thank you for you all joining us today, if you are a part of the FME community, we would like to provide you with a community badge code to redeem for points in the community. If you're not a part of the FME community, definitely check it out. It's a great resource for communicating with other fellow FME users and FME experts as well. So I just dropped that link in the chat. And if you have yet to fill out a Gartner Peer Insight, we really appreciate if you are able to contribute a review and share your experience with FME. I will leave that link here as well. We have a ton of great webinars and resources, safe.com/webinars, some great content coming up, as well as past resources that you can check out on other topics as well. And with that, it does look like we have some time remaining here for some Q&A. So get your questions in there and we'll start taking a look over those now. All right, I think that we did address some during the webinar, so that's awesome. Any off the bat here that we might want to get started with, Julieta and Trent?
I think it was addressed at the end of the webinar, but all of the workspaces will be available at the end. And we do upload the workspaces and the webinars to safe.com/webinars on the on-demand tab, where you'll find a download button as well for all of the workspaces. I think we also send out emails, but I'm not sure what's in them. Maybe Elizabeth can address that.
Yeah, we'll send out emails with all the resources, including the slides and the links. So you'll get all that after the webinar for sure.
I do see one really good question here on time in AGOL or ArcGIS Online that maybe Trent will be able to address because I'm not too sure. But it seems like everything gets converted to UTC time once it arrives in ArcGIS Online. Is there a best practice for handling this, for making ArcGIS Online display our local time? Would Trent happen to know?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was wondering that. I was thinking like maybe muted.
Yeah.
So I don't believe FME has the ability to set when publishing or writing to a feature service in ArcGIS Online to display the local time. I know you, if you publish directly from Pro or ArcGIS Desktop, you can, but I don't believe FME has the ability to do that currently.
Thank you, Trent. If there are any further questions, please send them in. And there's also this handy upvote button for, as I see many of you already found, if you would like that to be answered first.
Yeah.
There was a tangential question about webhooks and more kind of learning resources around that. We have lots of learning resources in our knowledge base, from articles to blogs to webinars, and in the questions tab, Trent has answered that question, so you can take a look there for where to find those.
It does look like we have a new question here from Logan. I don't know, Trent and Julieta, if you see it there in the questions tab.
Yeah, so the question is, how does FME deal with spatial extents when bringing in new data from a geodatabase to a folder that is being read from Enterprise? So as far as I'm aware, FME will just read the geodatabase or the that is being fed to the feature service. So I don't believe generally it will have extents on it if unless the feature service itself does. If the feature service itself were to have extents essentially limiting the data that can be accessed, I suspect that would have to be essentially rebuilt to include the data that is outside the current extents. But like if you were to be able to view the data in ArcGIS Online and see all the data, FME should be able to out of the box as well.
See new questions coming in. Is there a session, this is a question from Robert, is there a session on embedding a FME process into an ArcGIS for Model Builder? I don't believe so, not for webinars at least. I'm not sure if we have anything in our knowledge base about working with Model Builder. Trent?
I think the only thing off the top of my head that we can do, I don't think we have any sessions, but you can create a spatial ETL tool with using the data interop, and that can be, which is FME under the hood, which can be placed within a model, I believe. But no, I don't believe we have any resources directly.
Thank you, Trent.
Good question from Tim here with regards to the ArcGIS Online demonstration. Is it the same process for using an internal ArcGIS portal? And for the most part, yes, Tim. It's basically the equivalent. The only difference would be on the portal side is that it supports branch versioning, and then the authentication is a little different as well. But for the most part, yes, it'd be quite similar. It would almost be the difference between like working with a file geodatabase and an enterprise geodatabase. While there's little differences, but for the most part, they're fairly similar.
Next question from Will. Did you cover how FME can be used to get GIS data into ArcGIS Online? Trent certainly did, going from the photo attachments to ArcGIS Online. Not sure if you wanted to go into more detail, but the recording will be available afterwards if you wanted to catch up on that later when you get the recording.
A good question here from Bo regarding running into issues writing data to ArcGIS Online. How can you ensure all records are being written to ArcGIS Online? So in terms of if you actually want to validate, that say you're trying to write, 10,000 features to ArcGIS Online and you want to confirm that, kind of a common workflow that we see is users will use the feature writer, and it will kind of give you it'll give you a features written number. And then you would have to essentially read back in the records, or you might be able to do it with the REST API, where you could just get a count of the current records that are within the feature service, and then you would just compare the two to see if there's a difference. Yeah, something similar to that, I believe, would be the way to fully confirm that 10,000 features were written as reported by FME.
Now we have lots of questions flowing in. That's great.
The next question from Venkat. Is it possible to integrate with the FME REST API with Model Builder to call the workbench?
That would probably be more of a question for Esri. I'm not super familiar with all the capabilities that Model Builder supports. So that might be a better question for Esri with regards to if they can call a workspace through the REST API using Model Builder. And then I see a question here from Clifford regarding is there an integration or estimator for ArcGIS Online credit usage? No, I don't believe so. I'm not exactly sure how Esri does the credit usage, so that would be a question for Esri you'd want to reach out to ask them.
I do have a link on hand that I can, I guess it's already been answered. We'll pop in the chat just about ArcGIS Online credits. And when credits are used. If anybody does find out how to do that estimation, you can please definitely create a custom transformer to share with the hub for other users as well. So I've just popped that into the chat.
A good question here from Raven regarding, is it feasible to create branch versions and post versions within desktop? As far as I'm aware, yes, you can create branch versions and post to them. You would just have to make sure to use the portal writer. And there is a setting on there to actually activate branch versioning, and then you can either create a new one or read from an existing or write to an existing or write a new one, etc. We have another good one here with regards to reading a hosted feature class with attachments. Is it fast? So this is kind of dependent on the number of attachments and the type of attachments. So if you were to have 100 attachments per feature, that could get bogged down quite quickly, especially if you were using feature caching. So it kind of would depend on, like in terms of improving that performance, it would kind of depend on number of attachments, what you're wanting to do with the attachments, the type of attachments, to try to essentially limit the data that FME is grabbing at one time. And then, of course, if you can turn feature caching off, that would generally improve the performance quite drastically in some cases.
All right. It looks like we've wrapped up most questions here. I'm just taking a final browse through. All right. Any others that we would want to address here, team, before we wrap things up?
I just see that last one there with the demo workspaces. I believe we'll send those out at the end of the the webinar, right, Elizabeth?
Yeah, we'll send out those workspaces in a follow-up email, likely later today, and at the latest it'll be tomorrow morning.
I see one last one here, which is kind of an interesting one from Lewis, which is, does FME have a method for handling pagination? So this kind of depends. So certain readers support it kind of built in. ArcGIS Online being one of them is that it will return every single feature within a feature service or a layer. Other ones have to be configured slightly for it, such as the WFS reader. Or you could manually do it, like if any other REST API supports pagination, you could build it manually using the HTTP caller, which allows for pagination.
Awesome. Anything else on your ends before we wrap up? Does that look pretty covered? Thanks everyone for all your questions this morning. This is great. We got lots of great questions today.
I think that's it. I don't see any new questions.
Perfect. If you do think of any questions, we will keep things running for a couple minutes longer here. And hopefully we can give you all back some time in your day here today. If you do have a brief moment to fill out our webinar survey, we do appreciate any feedback on the webinar. It helps us continually improve our program. And I do have that link posted in the chat there for the webinar survey. And then, of course, download the latest version of FME. I'll post those links again in case that's of interest, and connect with us on the community. Big thank you to Grace, our guest speaker here today. It was really awesome having you present with us and work alongside us in this webinar. And of course, to the rest of our presenters and our wonderful audience. We hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.